Okay, 5 slides, five slide presentations. Great. All right, Representative Kessler. Representative Kessler.
Are you talking in class?
I didn't tell anybody I brought candy, but yes, I did. That was an apology for my cell phone a week before last that went off. And I apologize again. But hey, I waited to be recognized this time.
Yeah. Well, we're making progress. All right, committee, we're here to talk about childcare in the state of Kansas. And as we all know, childcare is a big issue, and it's an economic development issue, and that's why we're doing it in commerce. So this is Childcare Week. And as we tend to do in this committee, we like to bring information forth first and then chew on it a little bit and then hear the bill that is attached to this information. And it just gives you guys some time to kind of take everything in and learn about the issues and come up with better solutions than just a bill. So with that, we're going to start on the child care presentations and update. And John Wilson with Kansas for Action is first up. Welcome back to committee, sir. Good to see you.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here. And Representative Kessler, I just noticed there's no candy up here, but I'll work through that. Chairman Tarwater, members of the committee, it's wonderful to be here. My name is John Wilson. I'm the president and CEO of Kansas Action for Children. We are a nonpartisan children's advocacy organization that's working to make Kansas a state where every child has the opportunity to grow up healthy and thrive. And we do that by spending time in this building, working with you all to shape policy. As it turns out, there are a lot of things that influence the well-being of kids, from childcare to healthcare to K-12 education. Every committee in the legislature has an impact on the well-being of kids. And I'm so glad that you've taken time during this busy legislative session to learn more about childcare and early childhood development, topics that seem pretty straightforward on the surface, but are actually quite complex, as you will learn from our presenters today. Many of you already know this, but access to high-quality child care is necessary for Kansas children and our economy to be able to thrive. However, Kansas families are struggling with high cost of child care at the same time that providers are struggling to stay in business. Simply put, parents can't afford to pay more, and providers can't afford to make less. And to help you understand the complexities of the system, we've put together, in collaboration with the chairman, a lineup of people that know childcare. They know the ins and outs of what it's like on the ground. They know what it's like from an agency perspective. And so I'm thrilled that you all get to hear from them. Just to orient you to who will be presenting, Sarah Minchell is the Director of Innovation, Program, and Strategy at Child Care Aware of Kansas, and she'll provide an overview of the mixed delivery model of our early care and education system, also touch on the cost of child care and some other important data. Then we'll hear from ks.gov, Child Care Training and Opportunities, about a workforce study that they did. And I have to tell you, with the help of a team of researchers, Clarissa and Stephanie surveyed over 6,000 child care providers and other early childhood professionals to get a sense of how the workforce is feeling. And no other survey comes close to what they have done, and I'm really excited for you to hear directly from them. Then we'll turn it over to KDHE to talk about the health and safety regulations. And I got to say, Derek and his team have gone above and beyond to modernize health and safety regulations through a highly collaborative and responsive stakeholder engagement process. We don't have the opportunity to hear from DCF today due to a prior commitment, but there is really important information in front of you about the child care subsidy program that the DCF runs. Then we're going to hear from Heather Schroetberger with the Kansas Head Start Association. Heather's going to provide an overview of the Head Start model and also explain evidence-based home visiting programs, which are a critical component to early learning and child development. And finally, Melissa Rooker with the Kansas Children's Cabinet and Trust Fund will bring it all together in closing comments and talk about the challenges and opportunities that exist within our current system. And we'll leave ample time for questions from the committee. So with that, Mr. Chair, I'll let our first speaker, who will be joining by WebEx, take it away.
All right, thank you very much, John, and thanks for all your help putting this together. Sarah, are you there?
Yes, I am. Thank you very much for having me today. Minchell, and I am here representing Child Care Aware of Kansas.
We can't hear you. We can't hear you.
Oh, you can't hear me? Okay. Let's try that. Can you hear me now?
All
How about
right,
now?
well, I'm being told that we're out of luck. The previous meeting also had the same issues, and so
Okay.
we'll pass over you for now. If we can figure it out, we'll come back to you, if that's okay. If not, maybe you can make it to the State House and give your presentation on Thursday when we hear the bill. Is that okay? Just, you can nod? Okay. Well, we'll try to figure it out, and if we can, we'll get back to you. Thank you. All right. Next up is Clarissa Corkins and Stephanie Parks, both of you. Okay. Welcome to Commerce Committee. If you would introduce yourselves and so we can tell you apart, and we'll go from there. Thanks.
Thank you, Chairman Tarwater and the committee for this opportunity today. I'm Dr. Stephanie Parks from Kansas Child Care Training Opportunities, otherwise known as KSITO. And I'm joined today by my colleagues, Dr. Clarissa Corkins and Patty Peschel, the director of KSITO. KSITO is a nonprofit organization and a sponsored project of Kansas State University. And our main funding source is DCF. And for over 30 years, we have supported child care providers statewide offering professional development. Last year alone, we provided training and technical assistance to over 12,000 child care providers in Kansas. This includes individuals who are brand new to the field and are needing their health and safety training, as well as people that have been in the field for many, many years and are wanting to continue their ongoing professional learning. Today, we are here to elevate providers' voices by sharing findings from our Early Childhood Care and Education Comprehensive Workforce Study. It's a mouthful. We conducted this study last year. There we go. With funding and support from DCF, we conducted this study with many of our other partners who are here today also. This study represents nearly 6,000 providers from all 105 counties in Kansas, and it's comprised of two parts. There was an online survey and then also focus groups. You can see on the map that the darker the purple, the more people who participated in the online survey from that county. Knowing that turnover is a big issue here in Kansas, we also intentionally recruited folks who have left the field. And we will share data from that in just a minute. In addition to the survey, 39 focus groups were held intentionally across the state, making sure that we covered the entire area. We had a response rate of 24%, and for those of us that work in research, that is a very high number, and we are confident that these results are representative of the workforce. So let's take a look at the data. This is a distribution of the percentages of participants in the survey and the years in the field. You can see the left-hand first bar is less than 1 year, and on the right-hand side is 26 years or more. This is views of professionalism. I'll call your attention to the light blue and green. Those represent agree and strongly agree responses. And you can see that 79% agree or strongly agree with the statement, I view myself as an early childhood care and education professional. Whereas as you go down the rows, you can see parents, community, and then society, just over 50% agreed or strongly agreed that society views them as professionals. This was confirmed in the focus groups as they discussed that people simply consider them babysitters versus professionals, educators, business owners, operators, and despite their contribution to their communities. In focus groups, they discussed their desire to elevate the field by educating society about the importance of the first few years of a child's life and their impact on children's learning trajectories. Despite how others perceive them, many in the workforce have college degrees, certificates, credentials, teaching licenses, etc. In fact, 71% have some collegiate experience. 83% of our providers are interested in additional trainings, additional certifications, or in advancing their degree. We also wanted to know if regulations are viewed as a barrier and negatively impacting recruitment and retention. So we asked. And Clarissa's going to show you some of that data.
All right, thank you. As Stephanie said, we wanted to know if one of the challenges impacting recruitment and retention for child care providers might be aspects of licensing regulations. One question we asked child care professionals was if they felt the qualifications for the profession were reasonable. A majority of 66% agreed they are reasonable, with only 8% saying they are not. We also wanted to know those in family child care settings or in-home child care if the startup process for licensing an in-home child care is difficult and viewed as a barrier. 58% of in-home child care providers said they agreed that startup processes were easy to navigate. And again, a relatively small percentage, less than 20%, disagreed with that statement. Lastly, in relation to regulations, we wanted to ask a comparable question for our child care centers, and if they felt the regulations to operate a child care center are reasonable or viewed as a barrier. And once again, we see that the majority of those who responded stated or identified that they agreed with that statement, with 64%, with only 9% disagreeing that the regulations to operate a child care center are reasonable. So this data showed that regulations were not perceived as a barrier by child care professionals in the field, and so we now switch to looking at finances as a potential challenge to recruitment and retention. In our study, 36% of full-time child care workers in centers and family child cares reported earning less than $25,000 annually. Similarly, according to UC Berkeley's Center for the Study of Child Care Employment, Kansas ranks the 6th lowest in child care wages, with an average hourly rate of $9.93, just over $20,000 per year. So you might think a logical solution might be that providers could raise tuition rates, and however, as we heard from John as well, is we've heard in focus groups and over again, and some of you may be aware of as well, is that quality childcare is expensive for families. And so, as one professional said, we can't charge more because parents can't pay more, and so we're stuck. Beyond wages, financial hardship was also shown in other areas, with 18% of workers relying on additional jobs to supplement their income, and 27% experiencing food insecurity by reporting there were frequent concerns about having not enough food to eat. In relation to salary, we also asked about benefits received as part of their early childhood care and education employment. So this graph shows the percentage of child care professionals who reported receiving benefits from their workplace. The percentage in dark blue are the ones who do receive the benefit. The color in green are the ones that do not. And so we can see that over 3/4 of child care workers identified they do not receive a retirement plan, health insurance, or dental insurance as part of their employment. A common sentiment shared by focus group participants was that turnover is a persistent challenge. In fact, 80% of our focus groups discussed the significant challenges related to turnover. This turnover results in ongoing staff orientation. And as shared by center directors, when you have to close classrooms because there's not enough staff, that impacts not only that individual, but families relying on that care for them to be able to go to work. So a unique part of the study, beyond the large number of responses, are the voices of those who left the field and are no longer working in the early childhood care and education field. So we wanted to learn more about retention issues of those in childcare. We asked them to identify the influence of different items on their decision to leave the field. And this table shows the responses with the highest percentage at the top, lowest percentage at the bottom. As you can see, the number one reason was pay at nearly 3/4 of our 669 respondents, stating that this was somewhat very or extremely influential to their leaving the field. Additional high responses included benefits and work environment at over 50%, and we see that lack of respect for ECCE workers tied to the professionalism that Stephanie spoke about at 44%, identifying as that a reason for leaving the field. So while we wanted to hear about the challenges to recruitment and retention, we also wanted to hear directly from childcare professionals about what they need. In our survey, we asked, how can Kansas better support early childhood care in education settings and professionals? So based on over 4,000 short answers, the 3 key supports stood clear: better pay, benefits, and grants. As one respondent stated, we need to increase the pay for childcare in order to continue to attract great ECCE workers, include benefits, incentives, get paid for doing our continued education classes every year. And so this was a very large study. We were only able to share just a fraction of the results with you today. The topics on the left on this slide are additional data points we have available in addition to the data for our larger early childhood care and education workforce beyond just child care. Professionals such as higher education faculty, support services such as professional development providers, and those in early intervention. So please feel free to reach out with any report requests, and we would be happy to explore the results further with you in relation to the state, in relation to your county, in relation to your location, and we would be happy to look at those. The QR code will direct you to the study website, where you will find a more detailed overview of the results, along with topic briefs we call Your Voice Counts. Investment in the workforce is imperative to providing quality early care, and we are honored to stand here and share the authentic voices of child care professionals across the state who educate and care for our youngest Kansans and their families. We will now stand for questions at the appropriate time.
Okay, thank you very much, for both of you, and we'll go ahead and open for questions for the two of you. Are there any, committee, is there any questions? Representative Wassinger.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Did you send these to private daycares or just group daycare homes? These surveys?
The surveys?
The surveys. Where
Yeah,
did
the
they go
surveys
to?
went to child care providers, as well as this data actually was from centers and family child care. Is that what you're asking?
Okay, yeah, because the thing I hear from private daycare is that the regulations are so difficult to take care of, they can't get respite care. They can't have a parent come and stay for half an hour while they go to the dentist. So I didn't see any of that in your survey. So thank you, Mr. Chair.
You want to respond or move to the next question?
We didn't specifically ask about respite care. We asked in general about regulations, and with over close to 6,000 responses, we had people were very, felt that regulations were not the biggest barrier for them. That doesn't mean that some didn't have that. Of course they did, but yeah.
Representative Clayton.
Thank you. I would imagine that respite care would be a concern since those people would not be vetted and we wouldn't know if they were sex offenders. Just a guess here, though. Tell me a little bit more about recruitment for work. So I know you've mentioned pay, but where is the business workforce coming from on this? Are we going into schools? Are we looking at apprenticeship programs? What's that looking like?
Yes, we have early childhood pathway at high schools across the state, and that is one way that people talked about in the survey how they became interested in early childhood. Was they knew they were interested because they had experienced working with young children through their career pathway early childhood coursework.
And I'll say another thing that ks.gov also offers is we do work with high schools across the state of Kansas. We had 33 over the past year where we provide initial health and safety training to those students in those schools who are taking early childhood care and education classrooms so that they're able to go into classrooms to experience working with the young children.
Representative Penn.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, ladies, for being here today, and thanks for diving down into this. I just had a quick question, and maybe you can help me understand. And it's not a gotcha question, really. I want you to educate me here. I'm looking at the slides, and it has on a number of them the certification slide, the regulation slide, and the startup in-home childcare slide. You have the percentages of the respondents, but you also have the value in, which I would guess is how many respondents you actually sampled. And none of the sample sizes look the same, so that would skew the percentages of the readout, right? So one you have 3909, one you have 4300, one you have 1364. Can you help us understand why the same pools were not polled?
I got it, yes. So in particular for the center childcare and for the in-home childcare, we only took the responses from those who are identified as working in those locations. And so we didn't want to actually skew the data to those who had not experienced that process. If they may have just said, oh, I think this is what it is, we wanted to actually get those who had experienced being in that setting. And then the reason for the qualifications is that was the entire sample. This particular group also had a non-response option within it, which is why that N is a little bit lower than our overall childcare grouping, as we had people who might have been early intervention or other settings that said, I don't think this really applies to me, and so I'm just going to say that this isn't applicable, and so that is why that number is different as well. Yes.
Further questions? All right, I have a couple. So this survey was strictly to the workforce. And do you know how the answers on the page that has the reason for leaving field, the 669, do you know how those reasons relate to other businesses, other business types for people that leave? Are they about the same? Because they look very familiar as far as when somebody leaves a job, it's usually for better pay, low pay, they didn't get the benefits they thought. Have you compared it to any other industries?
We have not.
No, okay. And then, were parents involved in this at all, in any kind of a survey for the parents that
We did not, no, we have not done a survey on parents because this was very focused on that professional working in the field.
All right, and you said that this study was a lot more intensive than just these few slides.
Yes.
Would you provide the committee with the entire report, please?
Yes. And if you go to that scan code, you can see an overview of the entire report.
Okay, could you speak in the microphone? There are people listening online, so.
I'm so sorry. I'm sorry. If you go to the QR code, there is an overview of the summary. There were over 70 questions, and so it's a very extensive survey.
So when you go online, you can see all 70 questions and all the answers?
Not necessarily.
Okay, can you get us the entire report then?
The
Thank you.
overview of a summary is there.
I would like all 70 questions, if you can.
Do we have that? Is that what you're asking?
Right.
We have not compiled, that would be a really lengthy report. But if there are specific data that you are interested in and for your areas, your regions in the state, we are happy to pull that data for you.
Any further questions?
You just want the questions? You don't want the report itself?
Well, I'd like the questions and how it broke out, the answers. Not necessarily an in-depth analysis. I'd just like to know how they responded to all 70 questions. If that's not possible, it's not a big deal, but sometimes sometimes we can learn a lot from some of the things that aren't presented in this room, and those of us that, yeah. So, and we're getting ready to work a pretty big bill. So the more data that we could have, the better, in my opinion, but.
And we are available to stand by to try to answer any of those questions that you may have.
All right, thank you. Representative Ward had a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was just trying to clarify for them that you were wanting the 70 questions.
Thanks for the clarification. Any further questions? All right, seeing none. Thank you. Thank you very much, both of you.
Thank you.
All right, next up, Or Tanner, do we have any luck communicating with online? Okay. All right, we got IT on it, so hopefully they'll get to it by the end of the. Yeah. Oh, it's not just unique to this room? Representative Clayton.
No, it happened in our agenda meeting this morning. We had some issues with that as well.
All right. Well, maybe we need to pay the bill. That happens. Sometimes we don't have heat and air conditioning, right? All right. Derek Flurledge. Close enough? You stood up, so I know I got close.
All right, I think I'm
Welcome.
on. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, Derek Flurlog, but close enough. I was just telling someone earlier today that members in my own family say our last name differently, so I can't hold it against you. I'm the Bureau Director at KDHE for the Bureau of Family Health, and within that sits child care licensing. So here to talk to you all a little bit more about child care, the process of licensing, maybe some regulatory speak, and we'll provide you with some additional data too. So with that, I did have some slides. I had quite a few. Don't worry, I will summarize many of these and hyper-focus on the ones that I personally think are important, but if you all want me to focus on any others, just let me know. Like I said, I'm Derek. I'm also joined today by Allison Dalrymple. She's our Deputy Bureau Director and the Director for our Administration and Policy section, and she's helped immensely with our regulatory work. And then I would be remiss not to mention Jarvis and Melissa, who co-direct our child care licensing program. If it'll click over. There we go. So real brief, I just wanted to give you an overview of how licensing works at our department at the agency. The Bureau itself sits within the Division of Public Health, which is at the direction of our Deputy Secretary, Ashley Goss, who is also here. And then our Bureau, Child Care Licensing, is one of the programs that I oversee amongst a few others. We seek to carry out the health and safety component of the state early childhood lead agency. The lead agency in our state is the Department of Children and Families. And so our carve out is that health and safety portion that's required by the Office of Child Care. We receive a majority of our funding, 90+% from DCF and the Federal Child Care Development Fund. From here on out, I'm going to refer to that as CCDF, but just know that's the majority of child care funding that's coming into the state from the Office of Child Care. I'm not used to having this clicker, so appreciate you. In 1919, Kansas passed a law for licensure that required licensure for child care programs in Kansas. So I think that's a good historical note that child care licensing itself has been around for more than a century. In our state, we do establish and enforce the regulatory safeguards for child care facilities, and our main focus obviously is to reduce the risk of preventable harm. Regulation, by definition, ensures a foundational standard level of care and protection to children. And the key part is while they are in out-of-home care settings. And we do that through a variety of ways. Most notably, we require surveys on an annual basis of licensed facilities. It's worth noting that we don't license the individual, we license the facility itself. That includes different license types, as we call them: family child care homes, child care centers and preschools, school-age programs, drop-in programs, and then child care resource and referral agencies as well. And we are responsible for a long list of responsibilities, but processing all applications as they come in. That's on the operations side of our program. Ensuring the conducting of name-based and comprehensive background checks, which is required by federal rule. Monitoring, as I mentioned, through on-site inspections and the enforcement of regulations. And then our inspection activity itself is carried out by state staff. They are located all across the state. They live in all different regions and corners of the state. And then we also have specific contracts with some of our local health departments, mostly in our larger urban areas, that carry out the licensing operations component on KDHE's behalf in those areas. They all get the same training as our staff. We do monthly and quarterly trainings and meetings, and that's been an area of focus for what we call our field side of the program. And as I mentioned below there, we provide virtual and in-person training technical assistance to all of the surveyors, whom we now refer to as licensing specialists across the state, and that's on an ongoing basis. We will also note if we receive complaints in a specific community or a specific region, we may target technical assistance to an area and require additional trainings if they, to be quite frank, if they're not up to our expectations or standards. Trying. Core functions, I think I've touched on a lot of these. As you all well know, establishing and enforcing requirements for the operation of those facilities, which is in regulation. But we also have other core functions. We do look to increase the statewide availability of regulated facilities, of course, that meet standards, but that also exceed. Reducing the predictable health and safety risks to children. It is a consumer protection piece as well for children and families, so that families, parents, caregivers, whomever it may be, can go to work or do whatever they need to do in their daily lives and not, worry who's caring for their children, knowing that they are being held to a certain standard. We do have to conduct those comprehensive name-based and comprehensive background checks. This includes fingerprinting before providers are allowed unsupervised access to children. That also includes residents of family child care homes too. And again, that's all bound in federal rule. And then conducting timely and accurate inspections. We've also recently taken on the role for the state agency lead for early childhood workforce. This is a partnership with ks.gov and in discussions with our early childhood partner agencies, DCF, Department of Education, Kansas Children's Cabinet, that KDHE was best equipped and it made the most sense essentially to help lead that early childhood workforce. We have access to the facility and workforce data. That's who we provided that data to ks.gov to carry out the workforce study and the other requirements obviously that we have for providers themselves. So we feel it's important to also provide them that same support. And then as is noted, we collaborate very closely with other agencies and partners. The Fire Marshal's Office is one, and then directly with families too. So thank you. So we'll get into a little bit of data for you guys. This is a trend for child care facilities in Kansas. This includes all license types. The very beginning data point there is going to be 2012. Probably worth noting that on any given day, this data point can change. So we take them the same snapshot in time every single year. We do have these on a monthly basis, but that's a lot of data to put on one slide. But you can see the general trend. It is worth noting that in our own exit discussions with providers, which we cannot, we don't require, we do ask them if they give us feedback when they do close, that they have the love for the work, but kind of the same thing that the workforce study mentioned, increased demands for the job. But this is actually a national trend. So what we're really seeing is a lot of home-based providers closing. You're seeing a lot of home providers kind of aging out and more centers, which will make more sense on the next slide. Because, well, this is what we'll show you there. So in blue, you'll see our home providers. In orange, our centers. Centers have had a steady increase. I wouldn't, I'm not a statistician, so I can't call that significant based on math, but that it is an increase over time. And this is from January of 23 to our recent data point, December 31st of 24. And you can see the decline, minor decline there in our home providers. So again, another national trend that the state is mirroring as well. Next slide. So this speaks to licensed capacity to serve. So contrary to what I just told you all, our licensed capacity, in other words, how many slots our providers licensed for across the state, is at an all-time high since KDHE has been capturing this data. This trend really started in 2021, 2022. But that capacity has increased, and as of December, it's at its highest point, again, since we started capturing this. We did have regulation changes, which were effective August 2nd of 24. We've seen, there is a contribution to increased potential slots within that as well, but the trend remained the same both prior to that date and after that date. Over time, we'll see and gather more information on providers who were utilizing those slots from the regulatory changes. But for us at the state, there's no way for us, at least not currently, to capture how many of those slots are actually being utilized or filled. A good example, we had a location just this past year that closed, and it was going to, they provided care, I believe it was for 90-plus children. There was a center within the same city who was actually, it was a staffing issue. They had the licensed capacity to fill every single one of those children. They didn't have the staff. We actually worked with our other agency partners and with the local community, Child Care Aware notably, to actually get those staff transitioned over to that other employer and do all the things that they needed to do to get that taken care of. So sometimes it is a staffing issue. Health and safety grants, just a real quick, I won't spend too much time on this, but just noting that the $1.3 million that was made available to KDHE through the CIF fund, we've expended essentially all of this. As of February 23rd, we'd received 258 applications. The requests were over $2.27 million, and we had approved about 1.29, if I'm rounding up there, with an average per grantee of a little over $6,000. The most common items that were requested to meet regulatory-wise, again, these funds are intended to help providers meet regulatory compliance if there is a cost burden to do so. This included fences, roofs, playground equipment, safe sleep equipment, hot water tanks, car seats, et cetera, et cetera. These are really requests that we hope will last for years so that it's not an annual need for these specific providers, but we know that the need is there based off the applications that we've received, and over 80% of the grantees are home providers. Briefly, our regulatory review, which started in 2023, this is just a real brief recap of that. We had a lot of stakeholder input and feedback. We held various online meetings with the providers on Saturday mornings. We had online surveys for them to submit specific feedback, so we were really able to hold that public comment period through the entirety of our review and present the proposed changes to providers themselves for feedback. And those were open to the public as well. And then a brief review of the timeline. So we started in March of 23, and again, those took effect in August of 24. Some of the big updates from this, we did consolidate our 2 home license types down to 1. This removed kind of an unnecessary administrative bureaucratic burden. It also removes a process for our staff as well to move applications through in a quicker fashion. We lowered the age of toddler from 18 months to 12 months, and so what this does is open up infant spots 6 months sooner. You can imagine those children kind of graduating into that next grouping. We increased max children in care and ratio in our child care centers, and we came up into compliance with the different federal rules, most notably around medication administration, CPR training, and things of that nature. Background checks and fingerprinting was one as well. And then we worked to modernize and clarified staff roles, and then increased allowance for experience. And so, and this includes for providers not just in child care, but throughout early childhood. And we're working through providers with providers on that note as well. So in general, increased flexibility, modernization, reduced administrative burden, and the proposals that we presented and then received back, those are driven and have industry support, and then enhanced safety. We'll go ahead and go over this one. I will mention on that one, we just have transition plans, so we don't suddenly say August 2nd, this is what you have to do. We actually ease our providers into the new regulations. We will tell them if we come on site August 3rd and you're not up to code on a regulation that was effective yesterday, we'll transition you into that. We don't necessarily cite for it. We mark it down as a consultation and work through them with that. And so we're still actually undergoing that process as well. And I'm also happy to say now, as of a couple weeks ago, Valentine's Day, there's a new packet of proposed regulatory changes that are with the Attorney General's office, and this focus is on our school age regulations. So we work most closely with our Boys and Girls Clubs and YMCAs to develop regulatory change. I suspect you'll see some of these name changes in bill language, but renaming current school age programs to out of school time. And then also, as it stands currently, those programs cannot meet subsidy eligibility, but with these regulation changes, they could, and that was an ask directly from the providers themselves. The current drop-in programs, how this would work, they can remain as they wish, but for those current drop-in programs, if they wish to become child care assistance eligible, then they can change or move into the out-of-school time program type. So we're just trying to open up that path to assistance to assist more providers and more families. And to summarize, I would say over the last 2 years, a lot of stuff on this slide, but a lot of things I can't mention in its entirety today. A lot of modernization as far as moving paper forms to online forms, searchable maps to find their local child care licensing specialist, updating the web pages continually, reducing barriers where we can and having those open discussions. The one thing I'll point out is we're holding really tasked our child care systems improvement team to conduct in-person regional roundtables. You all should have actually received an invite from me prior to the beginning of the year, and then once the year changed over, an invite to our most recent one here in Topeka, where we've challenged our program, really, to be more vulnerable and hear that feedback directly. And if regulations are the barrier, take a look at them. If it's an administrative process, take a look at them. And so we've got to be willing to hear that feedback, and that's really what good government's all about. I'll say just the beginning, we're working to finalize a new license type. We've had a small center pilot. We currently can and do pilot programs. So we'll be excited to roll out a small center pilot. We are working to finalize this program type. It addresses a gap between home providers and centers for our centers that want to serve a 13 to 24 child capacity. We currently have pilot programs in Clark, Kingman, Ellis, McPherson, and Rollins. And you'll see our preliminary findings. We worked with KU to actually survey not just the providers, but also the families themselves. With that, I'll stand for questions at the appropriate time. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much. Impressive update. Appreciate it. And committee, I'll open for questions. Representative King.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Derrick, two quick questions. How many do you de-license each year?
Off the top of my head, I don't have that. We have closure information. How many licenses do we revoke? Not just closures, just revoke. Oh, it's
or it's either or.
Yeah.
Or is that a separate number?
Revocations in terms of us taking a regulatory action. Gosh, I'd put that at single digits, to be quite honest.
Okay.
We work through the regulatory process where we're able to say, here were the issues, but we will require certain trainings, or we'll come back, please have these papers on file, or please have these background checks on whatever it is. We try to work with them through that. As far as closures, like I said, that is data we do have, and we've been working to get the information from providers that choose to close, why they are closing. We ask them, we actually have an online survey for that, and we ask them if it was a regulatory barrier, if it was something KDHE did. So we want to know that.
Mr. Chair, is that something we could ask for, the number of closures and where they're at potentially?
Absolutely. We could have research look into that.
And one more question, if I could, Mr. Chair.
You may.
You mentioned timely and accurate inspections.
Yes.
Do you guys get inspected by the feds at all then, or where is your data? I mean, how do you verify your data or your KPIs?
Yeah, so inspection data, there's two ways to look at that. For the state, in terms of us inspecting the facilities themselves, we expect that there's a 90% timely response, whether it's to complaints or annual inspections within their inspection window on an annual basis. And we've been 93% and above since I started on that, which is 2 years ago, by the way, not that you all would know that. And then we do get monitored, as they call it, from the federal government as well, the Office of Child Care. And we actually just had that audit. Like I said, DCF is the lead agency, so we actually get called in, so to speak, with DCF, the feds. At least this was my first experience with that. They came to Topeka, sat us down, I think for a period of 3 days. They visited some local agencies as well. And we get our own feet kind of held to the fire on that as well in terms of compliance. So, but DCF would have that information for you as well.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Representative Osman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I thank you for your presentation. I've got 2 questions on slide number 8. I wanted to find out that's the child care capacity in Kansas by year, goes from 2008 to 2024. I'm just looking at 2021 onward. Can you help me understand what that spike is for the last 3-4 years?
Sure. Well, the most notable change was funding that went directly to the providers. So there was a lot of pandemic relief funding that either came to the agencies or went directly to the providers. There were scholarships and stipends. There was the child care bonus program. There was coverage for background checks and fingerprinting as well, because those come with a cost. And luckily, those have continued to be covered. And so I would say it's anecdotal data, but what we know is there was an influx of funding. There was an increase in your slots. I think the worry is with that funding, for the most part, that's gone away. What do we see now? I think there's also hidden points in the data that aren't quite reflective yet as well. Things like the Child Care Accelerator Grant. Some of those locations are still under construction, or still getting working to get become a data point in that licensed slot representation. And so I think those were the biggest changes to the system, and we'll see over time how it ebbs and flows from here.
Okay, thank you. One more question, if I could. With regards to this graph, I was curious, do you have an overlay of childcare need in Kansas? So that we can sort of see what the differential is between what our capacity is and where we're at.
Yeah, so KDHE, we don't currently, we could devise a way to capture that. I think Child Care Aware of Kansas could speak to that. They do their supply demand report, which takes our licensed slots, and then they, I can't remember off the top of my head, but they publish that report on a predetermined basis. So Child Care Aware of Kansas would have their supply and demand report, which breaks it down by county, which counties might be lacking or not lacking. It's kind of a hard data point to capture, again, because we're looking at, okay, we know this center can provide care for 60 children. Now, are they choosing to fill all 60 slots or not? And then, as you know, I'm a parent. My kids go to daycare any 3 days of the week. It's different every week. And so it's just it's a moving target. It's hard to measure.
Understand, thank you. Where can we find that supply and demand report?
Child Care Aware of Kansas, and I can certainly provide links to all of that after this as well.
Thank you
it's
so much.
online.
Committee, any further questions? Okay, hang on, I might have one or two here. On the $1.3 million in Children Initiative Fund grants, I'm glad to see that we're focusing on some home providers, and it looks like 83% of the grantees were home providers.
Yes.
And only 80% of the applicants were home providers.
Yes.
Is the money breakdown about the same, or did 80% of the money also go to the home providers?
Yes, so 82% of the grantees were home providers.
Right, but were those grants as large as they were?
In terms of their overall award? I'd have to break that down a little bit further. Typically, the child care centers might have a higher request depending on what they're needing, but I might refute that statement and say not necessarily, because there were some fences and repairs to home providers that were certainly up there, I'll say. So I can look at a breakdown and provide that.
Okay, thank you, that'd be good. I think that might be it on the dip in the chart of child care data and the number of slots. Would that, I mean, it was right after during 2020. Would that be to child care facilities closing because we closed them and they never opened back up?
I'm sorry, because of?
We closed a lot of when we closed the state of Kansas, and then did they all open back up, or could that be what happened to the number of slots?
I might look to Ashley. I don't believe we closed childcare, so to speak. So
okay.
No.
Okay, good. All right. Any other questions? Representative Christy Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So as a review, can you give us any kind of understanding or of the total dollars that we've spent since 2020 on childcare?
No, I cannot, because I am one piece of a very large system that comes from many different agencies. So funding flows in, as you know, from many different branches. Melissa may have that.
Yeah, well, I will hold that question for Melissa. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So can you speak to your part on how much your department has spent?
Yes. I can't speak to an overall dollar amount as I didn't calculate that. We helped with childcare bonuses, and we received 1.3 in CIF for the health and safety grants. I'd have to do a little bit deeper digging on all that we received through, that predates my start time and during that as well.
Right, so can you explain to the committee what the bonuses were? I think we have a report coming at the end. I was supposed to do it first, but I skipped over her. But I think we have a report coming on some of the grants. But can you explain what the bonuses were and what they were intended for?
Yeah, I'll probably also defer that to Melissa Rooker because the implementation of those predated my arrival at KDHE.
Okay, that's fine.
Yep.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
I think that's all I have. Committee, any other questions? Representative Williams again.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So this question actually would be more directed to you, Mr. Chairman. Will we be provided, you said there are some reports that we're going to be looking at, but will we be provided the total expenditures for daycare services since 2020? And if so, can we also have that per pupil, per recipient, and how many children are out there? And I'm just curious if we're talking about $400 million and how many kids received advantages from this, how much that was per recipient.
Yeah, I've got them working on that, and Charday is going to have a report on some of it today and some more of it on Thursday when we come back to talk about the bill. Well, Representative Rooker is
I know, it's
coming out of her skin here.
I apologize for not waiting to be recognized.
That cost the candy bar from the gentleman
Well,
over
and
here. So.
happy birthday, Mr. Chair. I should have brought a cake, right?
Thank you.
I would say it's not that simple because some of that funding was directed at childcare providers. Some of it is directed to families. It's not the same as when you're evaluating the cost per student in the K-12 system, where you have an organized system of public schools and you can detail the items going into the budget. The pandemic relief funds flowed into the state and served the purposes intended by the federal government, but that is a multifaceted set of services. So it might be that we can tell you how many children were enrolled in child care programs in the state, but it isn't the simple math of saying, well, we got this total amount of money and we have this number of kids in child care, therefore it costs that much per child. That's not going to actually answer the question. So we're working to pull together the metrics. It's part of why on Thursday you'll hear a bill that proposes to consolidate these services under one roof, because you've got at least 4 different state agencies that all have pieces of this funding. So you ask one of us that question, we don't have visibility on the other agencies' funding and how it was distributed necessarily. So we are working to pull that together ahead of Thursday for you, because I know that's a question that you're interested in. And we can tell you the general categories of use that money was put to use for. A large percentage of it was child care subsidy payments for parents. I wish our friends from DCF could be here to talk to you about that program today. Eligibility was expanded per federal guidance to 85% of state median income to help more families qualify. There were some pandemic waivers that were very successful, so the Office of Child Care federally made those permanent. So that's one of the changes. We offered a lot of different incentives early on for frontline first responders to have available child care to be able to show up for duty. We made sure that providers were equipped with the PPE and the resources they needed to keep doors open during the pandemic. Childcare was never closed by any of the emergency orders. It was specifically held open because we knew that people needed childcare to be able to show up to the hospitals or show up to the places that they needed to be. So it's an ecosystem that has a lot of different layers to it. Some of the money did go to providers. Most of the money probably would be quantified as the expansion of the child care subsidy program, and then some of it was for other types of responses. So our Child Care Capacity Accelerator, that is helping expand physical space for childcare in communities that need it. So it's a lot, but I will get you a memo that speaks to it.
That'd be great. And could you have it broken down for dollars? Not by child, but by category, where the dollars went.
Sorry, we did a memo for our federal delegation that tried to illuminate the use of the federal money that had been provided by Congress. So we will try and update it to be relevant to this committee.
Representative Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So basically what you're saying is if you spent it, you can track it and you can provide that to us.
We'll provide you information. It's the interpretation of that data that isn't as simplistic. You spent $400 million and there are 100,000 children in childcare, ergo you spent X number per child on childcare. It's not quite that.
Well, and I do agree the interpretation is subject to each of us to make that determination. But I would also say that, for example, you made the parallel with K-12, that even though CAPERS doesn't necessarily directly impact that student, it is part of the cost of providing an education to students would be that CAPERS. And so it's included in the total expenditures for K-12. So if we spent $400 million and we only increased slots by 3,000, then I think, it is subject to different interpretations, and that is fair to do so. I am extremely concerned with the amount of money that we expended, and we're no better off than we were before. So it is hugely concerning to me. I think we could have been better off if we just gave that money directly to the parents, and we could have saved a lot of programs from having to be funded. But that's just my interpretation. Thank you.
So we'll give you an opportunity to address that when you're up, okay? Derek, I had another question for you, if you don't mind. Under your regulations tab, you have you address the Boys and Girls Club. Mm-hmm. And that was one of the concerns I had going into this last year when we did this bill, where if you have an after school program in the same building as you do the school, why do the regulations change at 3 p.m. and you have different ratios, even though sometimes it's even the same teachers, same facility? Is that what you addressed? So now it's still like the regulations are identical to a school, or they're still more strict?
I'm not really familiar with the KSDE side of things. I can only speak to what we require for those school-age programs. They serve a different population of children than those school children. Some are school-age programs, some do serve that preschool population, some are a mix. It just depends on the program. But we did work with Boys and Girls Clubs and YMCAs to address their concerns. And I don't know, Mr. Chair, I think the biggest thing that was always brought to me was around the fire approval portion of that. I can't speak specifically on it, but the fire marshal's office did just change the way that they do those inspections from the fire side of things in terms of our school-age programs in school buildings that, in theory, should streamline that process on the fire side of things. That was usually the hang-up in my experience through the licensure of those programs. At our last feedback with Boys and Girls Clubs, they had a couple of questions for us on the regulatory changes that were mostly focused on what the federal rules require, medication administration, training, and things of that nature. So. But there are two separate, sorry, I apologize. There are two separate, it's a separate program. It's licensed by KDHE, not the Department of Education, though we do have a MOU with the Kansas State Department of Education for some of those operations.
Okay, well, that'll be interesting to learn more about, but I'm glad you're addressing it either way. Thanks for doing that. And then the final question is, drop-in programs versus your out-of-school time, the new name. What are the differences in the two? It looks like you're just kind of renaming it and then reducing regulations maybe, but is it if it's a school-age program, it's a school-age program. Is there just going to be two names for the same program, or are the regulations different?
They are different. So drop-in programs, children can actually come and go under their own volition. There's a very limited number of regulations for that. And I have to turn to Allison to even look at the length of the drop-in programs regulations are. Yeah, there's like 4. Our school-age programs, they operate a little bit differently. And I do see Boys and Girls Club in the audience, and so they may be a good one to ask about this as well. But our intent, we had a couple different ways that we could help address the eligibility for child care assistance, the CCDF funds. And the most streamlined, simplest way to do that was to take our existing school-age programs who had more expectations, more regulations for them already, and make them compliant with the federal rules and in theory make them eligible for those child care assistance funds, and then say, okay, we have existing Boys and Girls Clubs could be an example. There could be an existing drop-in program where if they want to serve or provide child care assistance for those children in that program, there's a path to them to do so. Do they have to come up into some additional standards, additional regulations and compliance? Absolutely, but there's at least a path for them. And also, if they want to remain as they are, we did not want to interrupt that. I hope that makes sense.
Okay, right. And so in any case, is there any curriculum requirements?
No, absolutely not.
All right, thank you very much. I don't see any other questions for you. Thank you very much. All right, next up, Heather Schrottberger, Kansas Head Start Association. Thank you for being here.
I'm Heather Schrottberger, Executive Director of the Kansas Head Start Association, a nonprofit organization that works to support the Head Start program serving young children and families across Kansas communities. And previously, I worked as an Executive Director of an early education organization that offered early Head Start, home visiting, and child care services. First, I would like to talk a little bit about the role of home visitors as members of the early childhood workforce. Oh, can you go back one? Thank you. Home visitors as members of the early childhood workforce and the role of early childhood home visiting within a mixed delivery system. Home visiting programs focus on strengthening outcomes for both children and their families. Early childhood home visitors provide early education in the family's home to promote the healthy growth and development of infants, toddlers, and preschoolers. Home visitors emphasize the importance of developmental screenings with parents, and one of the primary roles of a home visitor is to encourage parents as their child's first and most important caregiver and teacher, and to support parents in engaging with their children in positive and nurturing ways. Home visiting programs partner with other organizations and agencies that provide services to young children and families. They connect parents to organizations and agencies across multiple sectors and service areas, including child welfare, health, oral health, mental health, prenatal care, nutrition, job training, employment supports, and other essential resources such as food, transportation, and housing. Families may learn of home visiting program options during their interactions with those providers, so the connection works both directions. For many families, their home visitor, through the referrals and the coordination that they provide, serves as the family's introduction and connection to the broader early education system within their local community. In Kansas communities, opportunities for parents to enroll in home visiting programs include options such as maternal child health home visiting, Healthy Families America, Parents as Teachers, and Early Head Start. These home visiting programs are offered by health departments, early education and social service organizations, and school districts. Maternal child health home visiting is a universal home visiting program for pregnant women and families with an infant up to 1 year of age. The program focuses on prenatal education and connecting families with resources and services within the local community. In healthy families, families enroll in services when the mother is expecting or the child is under 3 months old. The Healthy Families model focuses on reducing parental stress. Parents as teachers, home visitors provide services to pregnant women and families with children ages birth to 5. They focus on healthy child development, parent education, and family engagement. And Early Head Start home visiting offers services to pregnant women and families of infants and toddlers. The focus in Early Head Start is on child development, family well-being, and comprehensive supports for the child and families experiencing financial or other social hardships. While the specific eligibility, federal and state funding sources, and delivery of each of these home visiting models varies, they share a common focus on strengthening opportunities for both children and families to thrive. Home visiting programs are designed to strengthen outcomes for infants, mothers, and their families. Parents might choose to enroll in a home visiting program during pregnancy as they are preparing for welcoming the new baby into their family. During this time, a home visitor will work with the expectant mother to access prenatal care and will promote healthy infant caregiving practices like breastfeeding and baby proofing to prevent unintended injuries in the home. For parents of infants and toddlers, home visitors offer timely information about a child's development and educate parents about the important opportunities in a child's youngest years for early learning through activities like reading and play. Home visitors also connect parents with opportunities to take care of their own health and well-being and to pursue their own education and employment goals. I'm now going to shift and share briefly about Head Start programming services in Kansas. Head Start programs in our state provide intensive, comprehensive early education services to Kansas families with young children through a few different options. Head Start preschool services for children ages 3 to 5, and Early Head Start home visiting for pregnant women, infants, and toddlers, Early Head Start licensed childcare services for infants and toddlers, and that may include services in partnership with community childcare providers. Head Start has income-based eligibility criteria and serves families facing a number of challenging economic or social circumstances. Head Start helps mitigate these types of challenges by providing high-quality early childhood education during children's most critical developmental years. In Kansas, we have 25 agencies who receive federal grants to provide Head Start services, and they receive that funding to serve approximately 6,200 infants, toddlers, and preschools, 4,700 through Head Start services for preschoolers, and 1,500 through Early Head Start services for infants and toddlers. Head Start does exist in the majority of Kansas counties. Collectively, these programs employ nearly 2,500 highly qualified individuals who are an integral part of our state's early childhood workforce. Head Start is celebrating its 60th anniversary nationally this year. It is a comprehensive early education program. In addition to offering high-quality early education through home visiting, childcare, and classroom settings, Head Start ensures children have access to comprehensive health care services. Head Start supports parents so they can provide for their families and contribute to the workforce by offering affordable early education and childcare options in Kansas and local communities. Head Start enables parents to work, to pursue higher education, and to participate in job training. Head Start focuses on strengthening families. Head Start's family-centered approach actively engages parents as their child's most important caregiver, reinforcing the role of family and child development. It promotes parent and family autonomy and empowers parents to strengthen their parenting skills through resources, training, and opportunities for decision-making and leadership. Additionally, the Head Start model emphasizes community partnerships with other early education service providers in order to effectively serve families and to connect them with the crucial services and resources that will benefit them and their children during their child's critical early years. I thank you for your time and the opportunity to share a little bit about these 2 additional early learning opportunities in our Kansas communities. I'll be happy to stand for any questions at the appropriate time.
Okay, yeah, we'll open for questions, and I just want to tell you guys thank you because you did lots of home visits when my wife and I had started having children, and it was good to know that some of the things we were experiencing were somewhat normal. And it was nice to get tips and help. So appreciate that. It's a great program. Those of you listening at home that have questions, you should reach out. It's a neat program. So Representative Clayton.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. When we talk about early Head Start, it's been a long time since I've done an on-site visit to Head Start or Growing Futures in Overland Park. Yes. At what age does early Head Start begin? Because I remember it being pretty little, and I remember seeing these tiny kids using their gross motor skills to actually pour drinks and serve each other at table. I thought it was really, really helpful for them to learn these basic skills. And I can remember, is it 15 months, 18 months, or am I wrong on both?
So Early Head Start enrolls pregnant women and families with infants and toddlers.
So right from the... Okay.
So at Growing Futures, for instance, they start serving pregnant women, and they do serve infants and toddlers in their center there in Overland Park. Head Start and Early Head Start programs design their specific program to meet the needs of their community. So depending on what the needs are in that local community impacts when they enroll and start serving children.
What is the wait list like?
Well, I can't speak to what the wait list is like across all of our Head Start programs across the state. But certainly there is a greater need for services like Early Head Start and Head Start than there is availability of those services.
Okay, seeing no further questions. Thanks again for your service. Next up, batting cleanup. You've already gotten a little preview. Melissa Rooker, welcome back to committee.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, committee. We do have some slides. Okay. Kansas, just by way of background, I think there are a few new faces around the committee table. Kansas was the first state in the nation to establish a children's trust fund in 1980, and then we were the first state in the nation to create a children's cabinet in 1999. The statute that created us in 99 actually also created the Kansas Endowment for Youth, known as the KEY Fund, and the Children's Initiative Fund, known as the CIF, so that there was a vehicle and a structure for the use of the state share of the master tobacco settlement that Kansas entered into at that time. In the materials that I provided, you can find some specific elements from the statutory framework that shows you the specific role and responsibilities the Children's Cabinet was intended to play in our early childhood ecosystem. Our Children's Cabinet we utilize the budget, the CIF budget, which the legislature approves in the annual budget process to fund our programs, and a good portion of that, actually, who is controlling these? Can we go back to the graph? Are you, okay. I'm gonna let you control, I'll give you a cue. You can see on the bar graph that the top line is Children's Cabinet. We operate the Early Childhood Block Grant through our governing board and Dolly Parton's Imagination Library book gifting program. The other line items in the CIF pass through to DCF, to KDHE, and to KSDE. The Children's Cabinet serves as the state lead for community-based child abuse prevention grant funding aimed at preventing child maltreatment. Can you go to the next slide? On screen, you see a map of one of the pandemic relief programs that we as a cabinet have been fortunate to oversee. We received funding through the SPARK process, $20 million for the construction of new facilities, $31 million from DCF, from the Child Care Development Block Grant, ARPA stabilization, or the discretionary funds that they received, and some private sector grant funding, a gift from the Patterson Family Foundation, to do the Child Care Capacity Accelerator, which you can see depicted in blue on this map. And then we received $38 million from U.S. Treasury directly through the ARPA program to fund a program we call the Capital Projects Fund, which is gold. You can go to the next slide. The Children's Cabinet has also been the state lead agency since 2018. During the Collier administration, we first received the Preschool Development Grant, a federal grant program aimed at improvements in the way the system operates. So we've used these funds as intended to strengthen the early childhood collaboration, conduct statewide needs assessment, and adopt a strategic plan for early childhood, which we, after 5 years, we updated last year. On screen, you see the central messages that emerged from the needs assessment process. Too many Kansas children are growing up in families where their basic needs are not being met, and geography absolutely affects your access to services. And then you see the 3 pillars that our strategic plan are organized around. One is strengthening the ecosystem. The next is supporting early childhood professionals, and finally, ensuring that children and families thrive. I want to note that in 2023, the Early Childhood Transition Task Force asked stakeholders across the state to identify their own concerns about the current system. We had over 500 Kansans weigh in on that listening tour, and the challenges identified mirror the results of our 2024 needs assessment. They note that collaboration across state agencies and organizations has increased, creating greater efficiency and increased access to services. However, there are inherent limitations that remain in a coordinated governance model, including fiscal and regulatory differences across state agencies and a lack of centralized decision-making authority. For families, this means they continue to experience a fragmented system that is too often unresponsive to their needs or otherwise not accessible. The bottom line, the coordinated model of early childhood governance is stronger than before our focused preschool development grant efforts, but there is room for improvement that remains. Now we can go to the next slide. I do want to take a moment to describe what we mean when we say early childhood ecosystem. Our work is anchored by the Blueprint for Early Childhood, which the Cabinet adopted in 2014. The 3 pillars of the blueprint are healthy development, strong families, and early learning. The graphic image on screen depicts the variety of programs and services that the 4 core agency partners, that would be the Cabinet, DCF, KDHE, KSDE, and some of these services probably also include KDADS. Those are the programs that we refer to as the early childhood mixed delivery ecosystem. It does include things like childcare, healthcare, preschool, home visiting, mental and behavioral health services, just to name a few. Children's needs are as complex and individual as they are, which is why the ecosystem encompasses such a wide range of services. We recognize that not everybody needs all of these things. Services are specific to the situation a given family is facing, subject to their own personal preferences. The numbers on screen are from our Kansas Distinct Count of Children data dashboard, and I will note that while a concerted effort has been made to accurately count the number of children served by the mixed delivery system, this is not an unduplicated count of children receiving services due to limitations in the available data, which is housed in at least 4 different state agencies. That translates to there are 113,523 children enrolled in programs, but I cannot tell you how many are children who are receiving more than one service. That is not a distinct count. That doesn't mean that we are able to serve half of the children under 6 in Kansas. It means that is the number of enrollments in the given programs. However, within a given type of program, we can tell you how many children are enrolled. We do also know that services are provided in every county in our state to varying degrees. So for us, the key takeaway is that we have many more children needing service than we have the funding to provide. We can go to the next slide. This slide just itemizes the sources of funding that support the ecosystem and early childhood in Kansas. Federal programs provide the predominant source of early childhood funding. The state does provide SGF matching funds and the CIF, the tobacco funding, to help draw down those federal funds. We rely on private sector funding as a major ingredient in our Kansas ecosystem, and in some cases we do see local communities providing support from their resources from either local sales or property tax levies to support early childhood. We can go to the next slide. Okay, so the following 3 slides show fiscal maps for childcare, home visiting, and preschool programs to the best of our abilities. The key takeaway is that every arrow on screen equates to red tape, to a stop in the system, a layer of bureaucracy that we have created because of the way that money flows between and among the state agencies to get the work done in the current structure of our system. Each step in that flow of funding also represents another set of reporting and compliance requirements. So you have, if it's a federal fund, it goes to the state identified lead agency. There is reporting criteria. When that agency then passes it somewhere else, there is another set of reports that have to be generated. This translates to just a very tangled system of funding that has implications for both finances and efficiency costs. From the community level, this means that each organization has to apply to multiple state agencies to piece together funding and create their own system at the local level. This type of burden to secure funds absorbs staff time on both sides and detracts from focusing service delivery to meet family needs. It also means that no single agency holds overall accountability for outcomes or total funding or any of the other types of questions that you have. It can be very difficult to draw that information together because we don't operate a true continuum of services that makes any sense. So on screen, you're seeing the child care fiscal map. You've heard about the child care development funding. That is federal. You've heard about CIF from me just a little bit. There's fee funds, there's state general fund. It gets transferred all over the place. Each one is a legal agreement and time and extra paperwork. If we go to the next slide, we'll show you the home visiting landscape. It's even more tangled. And then the final slide is the preschool ecosystem, which is just a little bit. Can you advance to the next slide, please? Thanks. This one is a little cleaner. It goes fewer places. CIF and TANF support the Kansas preschool pilots, so that's DCF transferring TANF, that's the cabinet transferring CIF funding, and then SGF supports through the formula the 4-year-old at-risk waiting, and students with disabilities have some funding as well. So it's a very complicated system, and it doesn't have to be that way. And if we could go to my final slide. You can see this is the agency schematic for the current system. You can see that it is siloed as depicted here. And I would also note that within individual agencies, there are additional separate departmental silos that exist. Clearly, this structure does not equip us to provide the type of experience that our Kansas families deserve, nor does it equip us to be responsive to the kinds of requests that we even have heard here today in a timely manner. There are burdens on providers created by overlapping requirements across state agencies providing similar services. Our system lacks clear lines of authority and oversight. Our funding streams are not optimized towards common goals, and there's public confusion over which agencies are responsible for what services. Parents are frustrated with how hard it might be to find the services that they want and need. We know that we can do better, and we're pleased that the will exists to address these challenges. So we look forward to working with you on this very important issue. Mr. Chair, I'll stop there. I suspect there probably are plenty of questions. Happy to stand for them.
All right, committee, so I'm sure there's going to be a lot of questions. We have 5 minutes. We'll go over it a little bit if we need to, and we'll have Ms. Rucker back on Thursday to ask more questions if we need to. We're not going to just speed through the process. If we don't get to the bill hearing on Thursday, we won't get to the bill hearing on Thursday. It's important to get all the data first. And if you look at this, the thing I liked the most about the bill we did last year was it put all of these 5 or 6 pages under one roof. Those of you that are on appropriations, we have no way. I mean, you heard Representative Williams' line of questioning earlier. We have no way of getting our arms around how much money is being spent and how much is overlapping. And so at least that part of the bill is important to as an appropriator to me, because it'd be good to get it all under one roof and figure out where all the dollars are going and how to be more efficient with them and how to help more people at least. And so with that, I'll go ahead and open questions for Ms. Rooker. No way.
No way. So I have had a friend throw me a lifeline, and staff did send me an executive summary, the pandemic relief funding, and Representative Williams is correct. It's $460 million that has come to the state for pandemic relief funding. We spent It's important to remember that Congress appropriates for specific reasons, just like you all appropriate for specific reasons. So a predominant share of that was child care stabilization funding. So Kansas used that funding. It was $213,897,405 of the CCDF pandemic relief funds were for stabilization purposes, and we used that to provide sustainability grants to our child care providers across the state. That helped keep doors open at a time when providers were underwater. It was more expensive for the cleaning supplies and protective equipment that they needed to operate safely. It was more expensive to buy the food they needed. Inflation, we all know, was running rampant. So these were grants used to help keep provider doors open. So did we tread water? Did we lose a certain number of slots? Yes, but you saw the data from KDHE. We have more than recovered. So that was money well spent. As I mentioned, there were the expanded subsidies. Those payments are made directly to parents. So that is the funding a parent receives on a benefit card to then go purchase the child care services that they choose to purchase. So that's the bulk of that funding. It's important to understand that the Child Care Development Block Grant Fund from the federal government has a requirement that 70% be spent on the subsidy side. So that is the parent payment. 30% is used for the rest. So we use it for some of the licensing fees that Derek told you about and quality improvement activities among child care providers.
All right, well, thank you for that. And that 200 and some million, is that the money that went through Child Care Aware? Or did that go through just the governor's office?
DCF is the state lead agency for the Child Care Development Block Grant funding. All of that pandemic relief funding stopped there first and then went out in a variety of different ways. Some were direct payments to providers, definitely the subsidy or direct payments to parents. There also were some funds transferred as grants. We got $31 million for our Child Care Capacity Accelerator. Child Care Aware helped with grant programs. So there is a whole universe of us who have received those funds and helped push them out into the field.
Can you talk us through the accelerator grants, what they were for, and how many slots were opened?
So we are on track to open 5,655 brand new license slots by the time that program completes. As I said, we braided 4 funding streams together. So $20 million from the Spark funds the state received. Those are ARPA, state fiscal recovery funds. Those are the most flexible of the pandemic relief funds that we used. The purpose that we pitched to the Spark committee process was to build or renovate spaces in communities across the state to help expand new licensed childcare slots in communities where space is the condition that they need. DCF, as I mentioned, matched in $31 million to help with the major startup, the operations costs. When you open a new business, you have expenses to help get your doors open. Childcare is no different. So we helped braid in funding to not just build spaces out, but to be able to equip them and open them with the staff necessary, with the training necessary. We had $2.5 million gifted from the Patterson Family Foundation. Because we had triple the demand to our RFP than we had funding to grant. So Patterson came in and offered $2.5 million to help us expand rural sites that with construction funding. And then $1 million of our preschool development grant we use to pilot innovative strategies. So we've got a substitute pool model that we tried with that funding, and it's now expanding and serving. It was 12 counties with the first round. I think it's growing. She's got a really successful business that is helping put substitute care into childcare settings for that respite care. And things like that, innovative strategies that you wouldn't otherwise have had the funding to try. We helped fund the pilot of the small center pilot to help test that model. We're helping with some programs with I think Thrive Allen County received grant funding to help address the healthcare access issue. They're giving stipends to childcare providers to help cover the cost of health insurance that they have to purchase. So it's things like that. The accelerator to date has 3,600 some slots open for business. We have seen 402 new childcare providers hired to staff those settings. A lot of communities are benefiting. We have some counties that have programs. Those counties did not have childcare before the accelerator funding was provided. So we're addressing the childcare desert issue and access to care across the state. It's also really important to note that that RFP required community coalitions to provide necessary community engagement and buy-in. So we required matching funds, minimum of 25% matching funds. There was actually more money provided by community match from other sources than the amount we granted. So $58 million in matching funds was provided to this. We view these as generational investments. These are buildings that will serve those communities for generations to come. So when we talk in terms of licensed capacity, this year, there's the number that we're reporting to you that's opened, but every year new children enroll because every year children age up and new children are enrolled. So this will pay dividends over time. It is not just a one-time investment where you say, well, gosh, you're spending X per slot and you only got this number of slots. So we have ample reporting. We've done a one-year report on the progress of our accelerator grant projects. I could provide the full report to this committee if you're interested.
Yeah, I think we'll get there eventually. You said the healthcare, that some of the funds went to pay for healthcare for workers.
Stipends.
So what happens next year? Do they just not have health care, or is this something that the state's expected to provide to healthcare providers or to child care providers?
Well, what we're doing is giving effectively an allowance so they can go to the exchange and purchase health insurance for themselves. This year we have the funding to provide that allowance. That's a bonus. It's not something that we expect to come back and say, hey, we need you to fund this. Yeah.
Well, I think that it's a good conversation to have, because if you're getting them to go enroll, right now you can enroll in real health care. If you make $15,000 a year, it's free. And it's free all the way until 25,000 income, and then it's like $10 or $15 a month. So it's very affordable. It's just getting these people to realize that it's there and it's a tool, and you can actually get health care. So I think that's the best part about this.
The nice thing about our work is that we do evaluate the effectiveness of the program. So we'll be able to tell you how many providers took advantage of it, and we will survey them and find out, did it help? What are their thoughts, and what are the outcomes that we see from having provided that? We have a framework for an incentive program to get childcare providers with existing licensed capacity to enroll more infants and toddlers, because that is a form of care that a lot of providers they'll say, oh, I don't want to take the younger kids, I want older kids, so we're providing a financial incentive. That's another very successful program. So we're just trying a lot of strategies. We have been very mindful that we do not have a one-size-fits-all problem. This is multifaceted, so some communities have space. They don't have the providers to operate it. Some have the people wanting to operate. They don't have the space to work in. There are other situations where it's a matter of modernizing an old facility to keep up with demand or standards or whatever. And so it can't be a top-down, one-size-fits-all problem. We need to come at this with our creativity and ingenuity.
Committee? All right, seeing no further questions, we'll see you Thursday.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you.
All right, committee, so we're going to put off the grant numbers until Thursday before we have the hearing. And I think that's about it. We'll see you guys tomorrow. We're adjourned.